Alright, let's get started. So we're here for the PhoneGap Privacy and Security Workshop. If you're looking for native embedded PhoneGap, you're in the wrong room. This can be a pretty hard subject. Wouldn't call myself an expert on this, but I have some experience on it. The style of the workshop is going to be a little more just going over content and techniques, but we're not really going to be doing a lot of hands-on, unfortunately. There will be little bits, but and if you have questions or any discussion or additional points you want to add on, feel free. You know, I kind of like the discussion, the back and forth style of workshop. So first off, who am I? I think if you were at PhoneGap.eu yesterday, which I assume most of you were at, I was the MC. Steve GILL. I work at Adobe. You can find me on GitHub, Twitter, or there's my private email. Probably should put my work email there. That's a mistake. I primarily work on Cordova tooling, so Cordova Lib, Cordova CLI. You know, a lot of the semi-module, the mini modules that Cordova Lib relies on. I've also done some work on the PhoneGap CLI, which relies on the Cordova CLI. Historically, I've also been kind of the release master for the Cordova project. So lots of writing of tools in that space to automate releasing and kind of, when we moved to Apache, there was a big get used to their release cycle. So that's kind of been my gig for a while there. Been doing it since 2009, end of 2009. So I just want to start off with a disclaimer. This deck that I'm doing is actually created by Tommy Williams. I don't know how many of you are familiar with him, but he's very popular in the Cordova community. He's always on Slack, IRC, Twitter. He used to be very active in the Google groups as well. DevGeeks is his handle. Before coming and working with us on the PhoneGap team, he worked at a company called Spider Oaks out in Australia, which is a kind of security and privacy conscious company. I think they built kind of a one password style application where you can store your passwords and enter them into your websites, things like that. And security was obviously very important to him. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it out to PhoneGap.eu, so I got selected to do this. I've learned as much as I can, and let's kind of see where it goes from there. So, what's the difference between security and privacy? How many of you think that the top photo there, it's secure? I feel secure. I mean, it's kind of questionable, but I think what I'm trying to go with is the top here is supposed to be secure, where it can withhold the power of a bear flipping you around, and the bottom one is more trying to go with privacy. The house is completely enclosed, in a giant curtain. Who knows what they've done inside there? Nobody knows, but it's private. But if a bear came out there, I'm not really sure how secure that curtain would, keep that house. It's still got windows though, so that's not bad. I don't know if you guys have seen this bear video. It's kind of a fun thing to quickly watch. I don't know who would do this. You guys can't see it. Sorry. But it's essentially tourists pay to go inside of a giant box and get flipped around by a bear. She looks absolutely terrified, but she's secure. Anyways. So the point I'm trying to make here is that with security and privacy, they go kind of hand in hand. Secure apps that ask for too much unnecessary information from users, they expose the data to the app creator and possibly others if the app isn't secure. So, that's something to think about as app creators. Private information being leaked is very much a real problem, and it can lead to social engineering, identity theft, attack vectors against other apps. If they get your email and maybe some security questions, and they go to your email, maybe you try to log in there, or go to some other sites that you might be using, like Facebook or Twitter. One does not always guarantee the other. So just because you have privacy doesn't mean you're secure. I think that's very obvious. And same thing with security. Just because you have security doesn't mean you're doing a good job with the user's privacy. Strong privacy needs security. Without good security, privacy can't be protected from those who have malicious intent. They can, even though my app really wants to keep your information private, if I don't do a good job with protecting against cross-site scripting or man-in-the-middle attacks, somebody can go in there and privacy was worthless at that point. Security has essentially 3 main levels of threats I like to think about. Who are the people that you are the most worried about when you're developing an app? Who are the people that could potentially go after you security-wise? Number 1 is probably, the script kiddies. People sitting in the basement at their mom's house that don't know what they're doing. I mean, they look online, they read a couple blogs, and now they're doing SQL injection on your apps that you didn't sanitize. They may not have actually had any intent to. They may not even think that what they're doing is illegal. The morality of it could be a little shaky. The second level of threat are actual criminals, people who specifically have an intent to go in there, get your data, and sell it for malicious purposes. And then the third level of threats, much larger, probably governments or rogue organizations like that, that are much big businesses that have maybe not as malicious intent, but it's definitely still a risk. So the crux of this workshop is kind of based on this man named Troy Hunt's kind of philosophy here. Have any of you heard of Troy Hunt? No, it doesn't look like it. I have added a video at the bottom, a link at the bottom to a video he did at Web Directions. It's very, very interesting watch, I should say. And then he's also got some really cool resources. He teaches a course where the goal of the course is to teach you how to hack yourself. So you create vulnerable sites, and then teaches you how to exploit those vulnerabilities, and then eventually how to protect your sites against these vulnerabilities. I would definitely recommend checking it out. We're going to try and do some of this a little bit of hacking ourselves today. But I'm sure you'd get a lot more out of watching his videos and courses as well. And just to kind of show you this, I think I actually have the site open, so maybe we can just quickly take a look. And this is just kind of his Hack Yourself interactive guide, I believe. Oh, no, I think I had the wrong one open. Sorry. That's all right. So this is kind of a little interactive site he has. Here's one site. It's just like trying to be a car site. It's got a bunch of buttons and links, and you click stuff, and this is how easy it could be to hack yourself. So in this example, he cross-site XSSs into your essentially adds alert scripts into your, injects them into your site. He can steal your cookies. He can do a bunch of different stuff just by having leaving yourself vulnerable. And we're going to actually cover some of these examples. I don't know exactly what he does on this site. There's a lot of stuff he covers that I probably don't. But this is a cool site. I played around with it for a little bit. And he took a lot more information of mine than I expected he would. So, what kind of attacks could be mounted against a PhoneGap app? And this is kind of the question we all want to know. Pretty much anything that can happen to you in a browser can happen to you in a PhoneGap app. This is, a pretty big risk, but it's actually worse if it happens to you in a PhoneGap app. And I'll kind of cover that a little bit too. So pretty much, they can get direct API or server access. Cross-site scripting is a very serious issue, which I'll cover in more detail. Cross-site request forgery, that's less of an issue for us, but it can still be an issue. SQL injection, that's always an issue. Man in the middle, I'll cover exactly what that is for those of you who are unfamiliar and talk about that a bit. Phishing can happen. And the issue with using it happening in your PhoneGap app is that if they get access to it, they also have access to the bridge. And now all of a sudden they can go in and pull all your contacts. They can get your location. They can write to your file system. There's a lot of danger there. It pretty much depends on which plugins you have installed. And a smart hacker could detect what plugins you have and really, really exploit your app. So that's why it's pretty important to sanitize most of your inputs. Is hacking hard? It's always one of those things. Growing up, I thought it would be kind of scary, and the people who do it are these crazy elite hackers who spend hours and know Unix really well, and just the stereotypes.
Have long hair and beard.
Have long hair and a beard. And a lot of times people think, no one's gonna hack my app. What's the big worry? I don't really need to worry about this, but that's not really a good way of thinking about it. A lot of times the hackers who do end up in court are the kids who are living with their mom in the basement. It's not a big surprise. Pretty much anyone can learn this stuff. It's very easy. Even going on Google, just a simple search, you can find up to 5 to 10K results, even more, to get database passwords, to get access to people's FTPs. And this is just doing a simple Google search. These are all people who did not realize what they were doing when they posted some of these files online. They're config files. And there's plenty of hacking tools out there, and I'm actually going to be using one very shortly here. They don't require advanced knowledge. They're open source. They're free. You can download them npm if you want. GitHub. You can probably teach a 5-year-old to hack. That's how simple some of these tools make it. But you probably shouldn't, just because they wouldn't understand the consequences.
Yeah, but also they wouldn't be tried as like adults.
You make a good point. They could get away with it.
I do all my hacking.
Through your daughter. It really just requires a bit of copy and pasting from online, and you can start hacking. So, what we're going to hack on today, so there's this app called Pix4, the Vulnerable Edition, that DevGeeks made. So this was kind of his second app he said he ever made with Cordova PhoneGap. And he eventually realized that the space was very competitive, and there were people who had a lot more time and a lot more energy were getting ahead of him, so he just decided it wasn't, put it on hold, kind of put it on the shelf. I don't know if he's going to bring it back, but probably not now that he's working here. So he ended up making some modifications, and he threw it up on a server for all of us to kind of log into and use today. So running the app, if you want, you can actually follow along a bit. You can clone the app, npm install PhoneGap serve, and then connect with your developer app. But the easiest way today would be to, if you have the developer app, and I actually encourage some of you to do this, go to the URL here at the bottom, and then go ahead and register. Probably don't use your most secure passwords for what's going to come later, but I'm going to be doing a demo later of actually showing us hacking into this app. But the more of you that do this, the funner it'll be. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide. Hopefully you all can see that URL. It's http take.pix4.me:8888. So who here has ever done any SQL injection? Any hackers here? There we go. We got a few. It's pretty simple. It's just a matter of adding SQL commands to inputs, and if they're not sanitized and they go to do database requests, you never know what might happen. This is kind of a funny XKCD comic. I don't know if you guys have seen this one. It goes, "Hi, it's your son's school. We're having some computer trouble." "Oh dear, did you break something?" "In a way." "Did you really name your son Robert, drop table, student, dash dash," essentially dropping the student's table? "Oh yes, little Bobby Tables we call him." "Yeah, we've lost this year's student records. I hope you're happy. And I hope you learn to sanitize your inputs." That's kind of a funny one. Another way, you could always just change your legal name. See how many people don't have sanitized tables, sanitized input. So let's actually do this demo. Hopefully some of you did sign up. I know the app doesn't work itself. You can pretty much just sign up, but you can't create anything. Is that what happened, or are you saying that you couldn't connect to it in the developer app? It didn't register? We'll see how it goes. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. I don't have access to that server right now. He set it up, but he's in Australia, so I think he is in bed right now. I'm using an application that he showed me. It's called the SQL Map Project. Have anyone heard of this before? Oh, we got one. Cool. And essentially, it's a way to penetrate different URLs, and you can really look for vulnerabilities, and you can also use it to crack. So I went ahead and cloned this, and I got a few commands from Tommy here. Sorry. So the first one, I'm just running SQL map, and I know a username. I know Tommy signed up. I know that username exists, and I'm just gonna look for vulnerabilities. So it's doing a bunch of stuff. This should be getting all the albums. I could be getting all the albums if I wanted with this, but right now I'm just, I gotta do some of this. Okay, shouldn't have said yes. gonna restart this, sorry. So it's just asking a bunch of basic questions about what I should expect here. Is this an SQL database? Is this, do I expect null values? That kind of stuff. Okay, it looks like it logged some stuff. And it knows that the backend database now is SQLite, so that's very useful information to me. Up next, I can maybe see if I can get the tables. Obviously, I already have some of these commands. If I didn't, you might be playing around a little bit more with the URLs. But right now, I'm retrieving all the tables from Pix4. It's SQLite database, so it knows that there's 4, and now it's actually getting the names of the tables. So this is just a free tool I used online. The big takeaway here is that he hasn't sanitized his data in terms of the URL. So the URL has parameters on it at the end that he's using to do actions, do authentication, things like that. And when I'm running these commands, for instance this one, I'm just adding -- tables to the end of the URL. And since he didn't escape it, didn't sanitize it, that gets passed straight through. And on the server side, he's actually giving me access by not sanitizing. So I can see that there's 4 tables. This users one looks pretty interesting to me. I don't know about you guys, but I kind of want to see what's inside of it. I can also get the columns if I want of the users table. So let's start with that. See. So right here, I'm looking at the users table and the columns, just some basic SQL. These commands do take some time, a little sometimes, so bear with me, please. Louis C.K. and cell phones?
You've seen that,
I don't think so.
it's where he goes off, he's like, people, cell phones, lose space in back when you're talking to people all across the world, they're magical, stop complaining.
It's true. Think about 100 years ago. Didn't have any of this technology back then. Didn't have to worry about hackers then. That's a different kind of hackers. Pirates. As Simon is so familiar with. So right now I'm just retrieving the columns of the users table. Looks like there's an ID, username. It's going a little slow. It was going a lot faster during my tests, but I think it's because you guys signed up that it's slowed down. I think it's just more information. Yeah, there's a password field, so that's good to know. So we know the username is text. We know the password, it looks like the password is written in text. So we know ID is an integer, password is text, username is text. So why don't we get a little bit more information from this? I'm just going to get the entire users table. I'm just going to dump it, and then from there we can actually hack it. So now I'm actually dumping the users table. It's going to get all the information, including we already know what the columns are, but now it's actually going to get the information in the columns. And then SQL map here comes with a basic dictionary that it uses for cracking the password. So the passwords are actually written as hashes, SHA-1, but how many of you guys think SHA-1 is secure? Once it's hashed, it's unbreakable. That used to be what people thought, but SHA-1 is actually very unsecure. So we definitely don't recommend you use that as your encryption algorithm, but your hashing algorithm. So he's actually hashed it, and I think this must be a quite the password, as it's taken quite a bit of time here to crack. So this is going to go through and try its best to crack every password that was put in. So.
I can understand the scenario. I mean, I have an application
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
How could someone first need the smartphone
Mm-hmm.
and make the connection to my application with the local information? What's the
So SQL injection generally happens when you don't sanitize your data. So if you have inputs in your application, say you take a username.
I understand.
Yeah.
But I have the information here in a local database.
Yeah.
But someone needs the smartphone to get the information.
Yeah, I think that's assuming that you don't. I think this is more assuming that you have a server component to your application.
Okay.
And if you have a username login, generally you have a server somewhere that you're storing that data. I mean, you could store it locally as well. You usually store, if you wanted to, you could store that session and using I wouldn't recommend cookies or anything like that, but there's different ways to store that locally, auth keys, OAuth, things like that. But there's generally still a server component that exists, and this is more sending, using SQL injection to access your server, which is more dangerous. I mean, you could still keep everything local and there's still risk there as well, but this one could potentially show you all the username and passwords. This is not just mine. I mean, like, I have the app on my phone and I could be hacking that, but I'm going after the API right now, the URLs, the server APIs, if that makes sense. So you can see it's already cracking some. Right now it's found the usernames. It actually, right now, I don't think it's doing the cracking per se. It's actually just getting the hashes and the username and the integer number. So I think this is the integer that we saw earlier, this is the password, and this is the username. And it's going to do this for everyone who signed up. We only started with 4, so there's definitely people who did manage to sign up. But as this runs, I mean, this could take a couple of minutes, so I don't know if we should really wait here. We'll come back to it, but has anyone been hacked like this before? I know some people said that they've done SQL injection. Has anyone actually had it done to them?
Probably.
Probably? Yeah, you wouldn't know, I guess. Yeah, unless you had strict logging and you're reviewing the logs. And yeah, it can happen, but I guess you wouldn't know. Okay, I'm gonna let this keep going, and we'll come back to it because I'm not sure how long it's gonna take, but. The point of it is that with free open source tools, you can potentially hack unsecure. You can potentially do SQL injection on unsecure URLs, and then from there, with a few simple commands, you can get access to databases. You get access to passwords. Instead of using SHA-1 here, they could have used a different hashing algorithm. Any popular hashing algorithms? Anyone can think of some right now? Anyone know of any? I think at Apache we use SHA-256 for our hashing, and I'm not even sure how secure that is. I think over time that could get broken as well, if it hasn't already. But there are different mechanisms you can use to do this. But you could prevent all of this right from the beginning by sanitizing your input. I'll come back to that demo. So what can we do? Sanitize. That's pretty much the gist of it. Avoid SQL injection by using parameterization. So in the URLs, when you have those parameters at the end, just be very specific about which parameters you're taking. So that keeps untrusted input from breaking the parameter count. And of course, sanitize, always sanitize. And by that, you could escape. You can use sanitizers that are out there. There's a lot of them. Templating libraries come with them, kind of baked in as well. I think Underscore comes with one. Angular comes with one. So let's go into cross-site scripting. So this is another kind of big fear for PhoneGap apps. And the reason why it's a big deal, I mean, there's lots of examples of it out there, of people using cross-site scripting to gain access to things they shouldn't have. This is kind of an interesting story. Who heard of the LastPass vulnerability? Anyone? Yeah, you did? So, who here has used LastPass? It's essentially like I use 1Password, so that's the way I would describe it. But it's a password manager that's you can connect to your browser. There's browser extensions, and then as you go to sites, you would just click the browser extension, and it would fill in the password for you. So it can actually create very secure passwords that aren't easily cracked, and it also encourages having essentially different passwords for all the services you use, so if one does get hacked, you don't have to worry about changing the password for everything else. But LastPass does come with one master password. That's the one that you enter in to unlock your LastPass library that has the vault, essentially, that has all the passwords in it. So somebody figured out, this guy, Sean Cassidy, that when you go to sites it doesn't matter what site you're on, but if it's a site that you use LastPass to authenticate with, and you're not logged into LastPass, so because LastPass is that master password, you have to log in, and that login expires after a couple minutes, so you have to do it again. And if you go to a site that you've used LastPass for that has authentication, a little banner comes up at the top of the page. So the banner isn't actually in the website, it's something that LastPass, the extension, adds on top of the website. So it can happen on any site. This is not LastPass's site either, this is on any site. And somebody figured out that you can just literally make a copy of that little banner, pixel perfect copy, because it's just CSS. You can look at the code of that. If you're using LastPass, you can see the code. You can just literally copy the code, build your own. And then you can use it for cross-site scripting or phishing attacks, where others will see it, they'll think they're logged out, and they should log in. They click it, now they go to a different site, and they actually enter in their master passwords. And all of a sudden, people have access to your LastPass account. And that's quite a huge vulnerability. I know LastPass came out with a rebuttal saying, oh, this is actually not our problem, just be careful. That was kind of the response, but I'd be a little sketched to use them. So there's two primary concerns when it comes to cross-site scripting. What's the source of the input? Is it like user source or whatnot? And where's the data going? So the target. So types of sources. Location and URL are the most common. Cookies refer, that's less to do with in a PhoneGap app because you generally don't go to a PhoneGap app from a different URL. But in the web, you know, one site will refer you to another site. The window name, and then there could be other sources as well. Intent is kind of an interesting one because that one does apply to PhoneGap apps. And actually for Android we've had to do some security releases because intents were found to be insecure. So it's another reason you should always update security. At Apache we are getting security reports sent to us quite often, and well, not quite often, but often enough that we have to send out security patches, so just be aware of that. Types of targets. Execution target, HTML element target. You can change location of some elements, and there's more. But I'm going to mainly focus on the first two today: execution target and HTML element target. So execution target, stuff like eval. I'm sure you guys have seen no eval is dangerous. Never use eval. Even things like on-click and on-submit, they can potentially be used for cross-site scripting. Functions, script.source, timeout, set interval. So these are generally things you have to be very careful about if you are using in your code, and the things you really want to be sanitizing. That's execution target, and then there's also HTML element target. Document.write, inner HTML, that's bad. I never use it. I know it was very popular when I was learning how to do web development back 6 years ago, but avoid it if possible. Window.location, this can be kind of hijacked as well. If you allow scripts to execute unsecurely on your apps, they can change things. They can change your window.location. They can kind of take control of your app. This seems a little. It doesn't seem as much of a big deal, but it does allow arbitrary script execution. So if foo is untrusted in this scenario, then once again your apps can get hijacked. Quick note about frameworks. Frameworks generally aren't always the most secure either. You always have to be careful about what you're using. A common example is jQuery. Like, I'm not talking about the newer version, I'm talking about older versions in particular. But Angular and React have some unsecure methods as well. So with jQuery, it's a lot of people target it because it's so common on the web, and older versions of it as well. So if you're using an old version of jQuery, you should probably upgrade. It's chock full of HTML element targets. So people can hijack these, element.add user, element.append after. If you aren't sanitizing these inputs, then potentially they can be hijacked. Frameworks. Angular, you should probably not use 1.1.5. It's got issues. They fixed it in the newer ones, but back then this was something that came out, and once it was discovered, pretty much every version, everyone who was using 1.1.5 was at risk. React actually lets you know not to do this by the name. Dangerously set inner HTML. I mean, if I saw that, I'd be a little concerned. But devs still use it all the time. It's people who are familiar with inner HTML. They're like, it's fine, and it is fine if you are careful about what you do. So some of the problems with frameworks is that they do add complexity. So if these, it's almost, for me, I almost feel like if I'm using a framework, you kind of have this implicit trust that it's secure, and I don't think that's always a good idea. You should look into it, and there have been a lot of blog posts about this kind of stuff, so it's worth looking into. If the framework you're using is secure, if the version you're using is secure. Excuse me. Just be aware. That's really the important part here. With newer versions, they'll always still find new vulnerabilities. So this is not something that like you're on the latest, you're good forever. You never know when another vulnerability might be found. So the solution to this is just stay up to date. And the same thing with PhoneGap and Cordova. I know a lot of people are very hesitant to update. I think in the past our update process has not been the smoothest. I don't know how many of you can relate to that. But I feel like we're starting to hit a more stable point, and it's a pretty big priority to us to not break things for users. So we do want people to be upgrading their plugins and their platforms, especially their platforms, as they're the ones who generally are found to have security exploits. I know Android and iOS have both had recent updates for security, so definitely look into that. So what can you do to minimize cross-site scripting? So you can minimize your attack surface. Avoid converting strings to scripts. That's very dangerous. Avoid inner HTML whenever possible. Don't write your own HTML sanitizer. This is kind of a funny one, but people do it. People who sometimes are like, oh, I'm just going to do my own. I can cover the use cases I can think of, but generally the ones that are out there are far more robust than what you're going to make yourself. And really, why do the work over yourself when great tools already exist out there? Use whitelist. That's a very Cordova PhoneGap specific thing. And CSP, which obviously is very web specific too, but we'll cover CSP a bit more and whitelist a bit more. For avoid converting strings to scripts, like I mentioned earlier, don't use eval. That's super dangerous. I think I've been hearing that for years. So if anyone's still using it, a little, I would be surprised, but it still happens. Function.apply, set timeout string. That's a little dangerous.
I think if you're still using eval, Douglas Crockford comes to your house.
Yeah, Douglas Crockford is not impressed. So inline event handlers like onClick are dangerous too, and that's a very common practice. Instead, you should use event handlers within JS itself. For avoiding inner HTML wherever possible, you could try text context, text, create element, set attribute. That's a better thing to do. I know it's a lot more lines of code, but it's safer. You could use a template system. You could use a templating library like handlebars or something like that out there, because they all sanitize kind of out of the box. But there's still issues with even using templates. For don't write your own HTML sanitizer, if you do end up doing it, just make sure you whitelist, not blacklist. Blacklisting is when you're like explicitly saying, oh yeah, this site doesn't work, this site doesn't work. But of course, whitelist is like, I give access to this domain, I give access to that domain. That's a much better way of going about it. And then there's also the alternatives like DOM Purify, Angular's got Sanitize, Bleach. There's many out there. I'd recommend a Google search if you're really not wanting to use one of these. TLDR, avoid eval and inner HTML, use template language with escaping.